Hello, everybody. We're just going to wait another minute or two while everybody signs on. Great. So welcome to our weekly HEALEY ALS Platform Trial webinar. We have a special guest today that I'm really excited for you all to meet, and then we'll give our updates and take some Q&A. I'm here again with Allison Gulat, Catherine Spall, and Sabrina Paganoni is back from vacation. And with that, it's a real honor and pleasure to present Dr. Michael Weiss here, who is a leading ALS clinician and a trialist, also a good colleague and friend. And he's led many trials in ALS and was really one of the first sites to activate and start enrolling people in this platform trial. And I'm glad that you have a chance to get to know him and hear from him. Michael?
Thank you, Merritt. So I've been the director of the ALS Center or co-director, I should say, at the University of Washington for the last 20 years. And I want to give a shout out to other colleagues who have been instrumental in seeing a number of the HEALEY platform trial subjects. And those include my co-director of the ALS clinic, Nazim Rab, who's a sub-investigator, Priyank Patel, who's just joined us as a sub-investigator, my senior research coordinator, Laura Sissons-Ross, who I would be lost without. She has been instrumental in helping me muddle through a lot of the challenges of the study. Drew Scheida is one of our new research coordinators. Annika McMenamin, a research assistant, has been very helpful. And my ALS nurse coordinator, Wenpei Ridenour, who we needed to help us to do training for the zilucoplan injections because she has that experience. So they've just been tremendous help for us to get going in the study and do the study. How do I get, okay, next slide, thank you. So there are some notable challenges that I want to talk about that we've experienced at the University of Washington, some maybe not unique to the University of Washington. One of the very first problems that we encountered when we became a site and started to screen subjects was, how do we do the pulmonary function testing? And I know this probably came up at a number of different sites. So what we did was Laura created a 12-page protocol that was satisfactory to the university, outlining how we were going to go about doing it. We had a dedicated room. We still do it this way. She had to get N95 fit training. She wears an N95 fit mask to this day. The room has a HEPA air filter, so it's constantly going, and then the room has to turn over for 30 minutes, or there's nobody in the room to ensure the safety of other subjects. And so far, we haven't had any issues. It's worked pretty well, this system. We started implementing it in the clinic as a consequence. We actually took it from the clinical trial to the clinic, and it works in the clinic as well, that method. The other challenge is getting Canadian subjects across the border. We've had quite a number. In fact, the very first subject we ever screened and enrolled is Canadian. And part of it is getting the medication across the border because we can't transport the medication. They have to take it with them. But they've been able to do that as long as they don't open up the bottles or the boxes, they can do it. Next slide, please. And then the other thing that we did, and with a lot of help from Laura, we created an IRB approved letter that we could give to the subjects they can then give to U.S. Customs to allow them to cross the border. And what I've highlighted some of the important features of it. So we make very sure that the customs officials know that the patients have a disease for which there's limited treatment, that they're involved in a clinical research trial that is not available in Canada. And once they get enrolled, they become essential, that their travel becomes essential, and they have to go across the border. They have to keep going back and forth to have monitoring for adverse effects of the medication. It gives them an ability to take a caregiver with them, but they just have to be specific about when they plan to return to Canada. They have to give a date every time this letter has to be revised, and where they'll be staying if they stay overnight. But usually they just go back the same day if they're for the Vancouver subjects. And so it's been a very exciting experience for us, and we've enjoyed being part of the HEALEY platform trial. We plan to recruit in many more subjects over the next few years and keep moving forward. And thanks for letting us participate in this, Merit.
Thank you, Michael.
And Sabrina, sorry, and Sabrina too. I should say both of you.
It's great to work together.
Hopefully we'll have some questions for you. We'll just go through, for some people who might be new to this call, our slides on the design. So this is a platform adaptive trial where we share data from people who are on placebo between the regimens, so we can minimize the number of people on placebo and maximize the number of people getting active drug. We currently have 4 regimens in this, but we are planning to add a 5th. People are assigned to one of the 4 active regimens, and regimen is our word for investigational product or name of a drug. Then there's another randomization where 75% of people get active drug, 25% placebo for 6 months. And then people have an option to go into open label extension where 100% of people will get active drug. The double blind period is 24 weeks. Next slide, please. So this is our enrollment update. I think we're getting very close to finishing enrollment for the first 3. So 694 people have provided consent at the master protocol level. Of those, 551 have been assigned to one of the regimens, one of the treatments. 505 people have then been randomized within that regimen to active or placebo. And 172 people have already completed the study and gone into open label. And about 80% of people who have completed the double-blind 24-week period have elected to go into the open label extension. So in red are the numbers of people currently randomized within each of the regimens. So randomized mean they've started the treatment, whether that's active or placebo. So 137 in A, 153 in B, 154 in C, and 61 in D. And so our target enrollment is 160. And so in blue, you'll see the numbers where we're closely tracking this, like on a daily basis, are the numbers if everyone who's been assigned to that regimen continues and starts that treatment. So there's always a little bit of a lag from when someone's eligible and assigned to a regimen. And that lag is a little longer for A because of the requirement for a vaccine. So as you see, we're very close for A, B, and C on final enrollment. We might over enroll a little bit because what we don't want to do is, if anyone's kind of in the study and assigned to a regimen, and we hit 160, we would let anybody continue on. So we might see these numbers at 163, 165 or so when we finish, and then 1A, B, and C are finished enrollment. And then people continue obviously for the 24 more weeks. But that does set the time for when we can start to expect to see results. And then the people who come in the trial would then be randomized into D, which would be the open regimen. And we are, as everybody knows, working with CELOS for our regimen E. And at this point, we anticipate that starting probably around November. A lot of this, is kind of fluid. Hopefully, we're not getting into our 3rd or 4th or 5th wave of COVID, but that's our anticipated timeline right now. Again, thank you for all the people who've been in this trial. We couldn't have gotten to this without all of you. Next slide, please. So just a reminder how to find the sites. There's 52 that are active. I know a lot of you have seen us have the number 54 before. We did decide that 2 of the sites, since they haven't been able to get active for various reasons, so that we're not going to activate them for H through D. If things change for them, we can bring them back in for E. Next slide, please. Any questions, any difficulties, anything you want to know, please call or contact by phone or email our patient navigators, Allison and Catherine, who many of you know on this call. And we'll put how to reach them also in the chat. Next slide. We're getting great ideas still. These are some of our upcoming speakers that will be joining us and some of the ideas that we've gotten, but please send us any other ideas of what you'd like to hear on these weekly calls. Next slide. And just a reminder that we do have the science webinars posted on our website. We will be doing one with CELOS soon, probably in September, so you can get to learn about that drug, the science behind it, and why it was selected to join the platform trial. Next slide. And great. I am, I'll just say that I am personally going on vacation tomorrow. But if enrollment finishes while I'm on vacation, I'll probably come back to this meeting. But that would be a
Yeah.
good.
I was gonna say I cannot wait to announce the enrollment goals. So Merit, yes, we'll call you back from vacation if needed. So we have a few questions now for the rest of the webinar. I'll take them in the order they were submitted. So the first question is about the EAP companion or expanded access companion that we have in parallel to the platform trial. As some of you know, we have this small program to allow access to some of these drugs for people who are not eligible for the trial. So the question we received is, will the EAP or expanded access companion have a minimum vital capacity requirement as an inclusion criterion? Merit, maybe would you want to take that?
Sure. So our goal is to have all the EAPs not have that as a inclusion criteria. And I do think one of them right now does, but we are in negotiations with the company to see if we can eliminate that. But our goal is really that the criteria are that you're not eligible for the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial. And if there's any particular safety thing, we would add that in, but that would be really the main inclusion criteria. But currently there is one that has a SVC minimum, but we are just in discussions about amending that.
Right, thank you. Yeah, wanted to ask you, Michael, are you seeing any impact from COVID in terms of people with ALS getting into the clinic? And also a second question about this topic, what happens if you're traveling to a trial site and then COVID prevents access to the clinic?
Well, we still do a fair amount of telemedicine, and so we expect to be able to continue to do that. I think that's picking up recently because we've had our own, I don't know what's number way surge, like fifth surge, I guess. And so the patients are becoming more hesitant to come to the clinic. And I think that will continue to be the way we can help manage subjects long-term, probably beyond the pandemic, I would think, for patients who have difficulty getting out of their house. But one of the things we're trying to do, and I don't know, I was been meaning to ask you this question, Merritt, we're trying to institute a home spirometry program for the clinic. But we're trying to find, we're actually trying to apply for funding because many of the patients can't even afford the spirometers that we can find for them, and they're not covered by insurance. We actually applied for a grant recently, but we didn't get it through the apply for another grant just to sort of pioneer this program. I suspect you have funding to be able to do that for your clinics, your patients. Is that right, Merritt?
I think it's a really important thing to do, and we've learned in these trials that you can measure people's breathing at home, and to be able to show that it improves clinical care, it would be really critical. I'll say we haven't started clinically; we're just doing it in the trial. I would say that there's an organization, ALS Finding a Cure, that because I think they funded one of your trials. They now have a care component. They just issued a call for care grants. So that might be a great project for that.
Yeah.
Yes, that sounds like a good place to look for funding.
Thank you. We're receiving a few questions about sort of end of study and open label extension. So the first question about open label extension for you, Merit, is it safe to assume that if 80% of the participants continue in the open label extension after 24 weeks, that the drug is effective?
It's a good question. I don't think we can assume that. I think it means that people probably means that the drug is probably reasonably safe, that people feel okay on it and they want to give it a chance, because during the double blind they didn't know if they were on the active drug or placebo, and here they know for sure. And I'd say that the open label extension is helpful in many ways. One is it's just the right thing to do, to provide that option for people who were in the trial. But the other, it does actually provide long-term data on how the drug does and what happens to people when they start it 6 months later, and safety. And we know from the AMX 035, the AMLEX study that Sabrina led, how critical that part of the study was. So we are really grateful that 80% of people are choosing that.
Next question. Have you seen any efficacy already from any of the trial treatments? So I don't know if you want to start, maybe Michael, or
have I seen any efficacy? I think that's challenging because, of course, I don't know if patients are blinded or because I'm blinded. I don't know if they're on the drug or on placebo. I've certainly seen some subjects seem like they're stabilized, but I don't know what they're on. So it's very hard for me to be able to say that the treatment has actually helped them or not at this point.
And thank you for that. And I also wanted to ask you as a site investigator to help us explain if it helps, how much does it help to give spinal fluid? How do you have the conversation with your participants? That's an optional procedure.
Well, I talked to them about how that it's so important to identify specific biomarkers that can give us an idea about how the disease is going to potentially unfold, what the effects are of any study drug. And so the more information we have about so-called biomarkers, including the ones that are going to be more likely to be often more relevant to motor neuron degeneration, which are in the spinal fluid, the more we're going to be able to answer some of these questions about whether these medications have potential to help them.
Yeah, definitely. So question about sort of the next steps as we complete enrollment for A, B, and C. So Merit, when enrollment is completed for A, B, and C, will all participants be enrolled on D?
Yes, so for a while D is the only one open, then anyone that came in would go into D. And for that reason, we actually expect D to finish enrollment very soon after A through C. And I don't know yet whether there'll be an overlap with E, the Selos drug, and D. There might be, but basically people who come in the trial are eligible for whatever's open at that time. And there will be a period of time where D is the only one.
Yeah,
I'm also just happy to say that we've talked to, I think we're up to 62 or 63 companies now interested in the platform trial. And I'll just say we're not going to have 62 arms at some point, but there's a lot of interest. But several have just applied officially to join us for next year. So I'm really excited. I do think that we'll have at most times 3 or 4 running at the same time.
Great, yeah. Merit, along those lines, there's a question that came to the chat. Will you let participants who have completed their regimen get the most promising regimen once results are in? I guess, will everyone be rolled over to a positive drug? Yeah,
that is an excellent question. I don't have the answer yet, other than I'll say that we're talking to the companies. In the ideal world, and that, which is how platform trials are really meant to work, is that if one of the arms is positive, then everybody in the other arms would go in it on that. So you start to get a combination of drugs. But I think a lot of it's going to depend on the results and then the availability of the drug by the company. But we're starting to plan what that might look like. And I obviously hope that it's much more than one that works, but obviously we don't know. And but as soon as we have the last enrollment, we have our timeline of when we'll have the results, we'll share that on this webinar.
Great. So there's a question for you, Michael, specifically. Have you seen any cases of ALS being reversed?
I can't say that I have. Not patients who have classic upper and lower motor neuron findings that are fairly widespread. I know Rick Bedlick at Duke has a nice little series he's published of these cases. I've seen a few cases of suspected ALS, which is usually this question of progressive muscular atrophy, where they did seem to get better, but usually with some treatment. I just ended up treating them with not knowing for sure what they had with medications like IVIG, but these are very specific patients and very specific reasons for doing it, but not classic ALS. Not seen that.
Okay. So I'll take the next question. There's a question about whether AMX35 has entered a phase 3 trial. So as was announced on some of our recent webinars, there's going to be a phase 3 trial for AMX35. We're actively working on that in collaboration with the company. It's really great to work with the company and a really great collaboration from both the NILS consortium and our European colleagues. So the trial should start over the next few weeks. I don't have an exact timelines, but there's very active movements. There's lots of work behind the scenes to prepare for the trial to start enrolling participants. So you should come to the US over the next few weeks. We'll certainly keep you posted. Again, I don't know, have an exact date for the beginning of enrollment, but that's going to be very soon. So Michael, you have been speaking about telemedicine and telehealth. So can you give us a sense of whether telehealth and telehealth options are available at all clinics, or is this just on a case-by-case basis?
Well, so in Washington State, and specifically the University of Washington, we're still allowed to do telehealth visits whenever patients ask us that they would prefer that. We can't do them. What's becoming more of an issue is whether we can do them out of state. So because if I don't have a license, let's say in a nearby state like Idaho, and during the midst of the early part of the pandemic, that the licensure was waived, the requirements for licensure is waived, but that's becoming more of an issue. Definitely can't do that for new patients. I could not see a new patient in Idaho anymore, but I could probably still see a follow-up patient. And I definitely can see any patient in Washington State via telemedicine. I'd say about 15% of my patients or like in the last couple of weeks, are doing telemedicine visits.
Great. So Mary, there's a general question about the expanded access program. Can you tell us more about whether the program is in place and how can people enroll, or what are the criteria?
Yeah, thank you. So we are trying to grow this expanded access program, and we ask every company now that works with the platform trial to provide it. And most have been able to say yes, but they're still relatively small. So we have one for Biohaven that just started, and that's at 3 centers. We have one for Clean that should start hopefully by the end of August at 3 centers also, and Prolenia, which we hope will start at the end of September at also 3 places. So that would be nine sites or so, 8 or 9 sites. And people do have to be get their care at that site, and they have to not be eligible for the platform trial. So so at this time, it still is kind of limited to those sites, but we are working very hard to offer this at other sites as well.
Thank you. So Michael, a question for you, and this is actually a question, a discussion topic that's been pretty popular recently. How are people with ALS finding out about a site or about a trial? So are neurologists locally speaking to their patients, or how do they get to you? Are patients finding out about trials through webinars? What's your experience?
So every single ALS patient that I see in clinic, I discuss the current clinical trials that we have, including the HEALEY trial. And I try to strategize. I mean, I don't want them to feel that they should go into, that they can't make the decision themselves. But if we have more than one study, I suggest to them that this study might be better for them based on their current situation than another study. And I'm sure they listen to me to some, I hope they listen to me to some extent, maybe they don't. And then my co-director, the ALS clinic, she's also Dr. Rad. She's also involved in the HEALEY platform. She does the same thing. The other neurology providers, I'm hoping that they are. We get the word out to them to disseminate this information. And then I also disseminate this information, including sort of brief summary of inclusion and exclusion criteria and what the studies entail, to other neuromuscular neurologists in the area and the ALS Association locally. But we've not been doing our own webinars. Maybe we should. We've had such an interest, though, and get so many referrals from, I think from the NEALS, because we already had about 10 subjects interested in the study before we even got the word out when we started last year. So I assume that they went on webinars in the NEALS, and then they found out that we were a site, and then they contacted us. It was actually quite easy in some ways. So it's been very helpful to have all the different webinars that the NEALS has done to allow for us to recruit.
Okay, so we have several questions coming in. So I guess maybe we'll try to take the ones we have quickly over the next few minutes. Has there been a discussion about the combination of drugs for treatment? I guess maybe we'll have more than one positive drugs, or any thoughts on that? Michael, do you want to start?
About combination of drugs for treatment? Yes. So, I mean, I think we're thinking that their combination therapy, it has potential to be more effective than individual therapies. And it's just hard to do studies with multiple medications at the same time. We're effectively doing that, though, for some studies, I think indirectly, like most studies that have been done recently have included, most of the patients have been on riluzole plus the other medication, the study medication like radicava. Most of those patients are on riluzole. I would presume that's true for the HEALEY, but I don't know if those numbers have been computed at this point. But that generally happens. Now, not all subjects are on riluzole, so it becomes harder to know for sure if the combination of therapies is more important than no combination. And there isn't an arm where we don't have patients on either drug. So, but doing those kinds of studies, the challenges that are going to, I don't know how to do those effectively. The number of subjects you would need would be challenging. Maybe, Merritt, you have thought about this and how to make that work. And this is sort of what I know a lot of the oncologic studies, how they're done to sort of combination therapies, but I struggle to figure out how we can make that work very easily.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think that's we're going to need combination treatments to really, effectively treat this illness. We think, and like Dr. Weiss said, in this trial, people are on riluzole, they're on a Dair, and then they're on the new drug. So we are doing that. And any drug that comes on the market that becomes FDA approved, we would also allow in this platform trial. And we do balance, we stratify on that, so the groups are balanced by that. So we are doing combination treatments, but we're adding ones as they get approved.
Yeah, thank you. So Michael, I think there's a follow-up comment to something that was mentioned earlier. So that the person who's writing says that she understands that this is a double-blind study and we don't know if a person is on active or placebo. But you mentioned that maybe some people have stabilized. And so the question is whether, do you have any sense of which regimen they were on, which drug could be more beneficial than others?
I just think it's sort of across the board. I wouldn't say there's a specific regimen where I see this, but we know that sometimes happens with ALS patients. Is normally they just might, maybe for a while they don't have the same rate of decline that they've had previously, and that's my only thought about it, because I don't know whether they're on the drug or placebo. And as I said, I don't think there's a particular regimen where I've seen this, and it hasn't been many subjects, but there've been a couple.
Thank you. So there's a question about Canada. And first of all, I want to thank you, Michael, because I know you really worked with our team to really help Canadians get access to the trial at your site, and also helped us, by sharing your knowledge, the letter template that you showed earlier. So that's great. So there's a question here about, a speculative question about Amylyx. So should it be approved, AMX35, should it be approved in Canada? How would you handle an approval there, both for Canadians who want to do a FAAN trial and also US citizens who might travel to Canada to receive it?
That is a great question. I think it would be challenged. I'm not sure if US citizens, well, they would have to establish care in Canada, because I can't write a prescription as an American physician and to get them any kind of medication in Canada anymore. That's not allowable. So they'd have to establish a Canadian physician. They could, but right now I would assume that makes them ineligible for HEALEY. So then there'd have to be some thought about whether to revise the protocols, and that would be a big discussion. And I'm not sure how how everyone would feel in that regard if it's not approved in the United States, but it's approved in Canada.
Yeah, I can add maybe to that we have a kind of an executive committee for the platform trials been talking about this, and basically once a drug becomes FDA approved, it would be obviously allowed in the platform trial, and we might have to adjust the trial, like increase the sample size for the regimen so that we can still tell if the new drug works or not. But until it's US FDA approved, we could do both. But thanks to a lot of good advocacy, hopefully there'll be some progress at the US FDA for faster approvals for the FDA.
Yeah, and just to conclude the thoughts about AMX35, there's another question about the components of AMX35. So I can take that. Those are TATCA and sodium phenylbutyrate. The doses and components are actually published open access. So if you go to the journals, they're all available. You can write to us and we can send you the copies of the journals with all the information. We do know that the drug, the pharmaceutical grade drug known as AMX35. First of all, it's pharmaceutical grade, so it's not a supplement. It's actually, you know, pharmaceutical grade product, and it's been optimized with absorption. So again, that's you know, we hope again that it will be approved in Canada and as well as other countries, hopefully soon. Question for you, Merit. At what point will a participant in the HEALEY trial be told if they were on drug or placebo?
Yeah, very good question. Our plan is that to share that information as soon as possible after the database has been locked and analyzed. So what that means is when the last person finishes the 6-month follow-up, there's usually 6 to 8 weeks where all the data is kind of cleaned and the statistics are done, and then you know the top line results. Our plan is at that point to let people know. You can't do it sooner, otherwise it invalidates the whole trial, and I know nobody wants that. But we can do it, you know, after we have the database lock and the results.
Great.
Some companies, I will say, wait longer. They wait until the paper's published, or they wait until they know the FDA doesn't have any questions. But we have heard very loudly and clearly from people that that's way too long, and so want to do better than that.
Great. Michael, could you clarify if times of years for eligibility are people, you know, is time calculated from onset or from diagnosis?
It's from, my understanding, it's from onset. Yes.
Right.
Symptoms.
Exactly.
Yes, symptom onset. And it has to be very specific, as I recall, too. It has to be very well documented.
Yeah, exactly. And that's typical for ALS studies. There was a question about the reversals. Can you maybe clarify a little bit more your thoughts about sort of what does cure or reversal imply?
I just think it means that there's some evidence, although it's still preliminary, that there are patients who have classic Lou Gehrig's disease who actually have either that get substantially better and have a reversal of their symptoms. But that is not, there's not a lot of literature or studies to support that, just what has been done at Duke. I'm not saying that it isn't possible, it's just that it hasn't been my experience. That's all I'm saying. I haven't seen that.
Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, the last comment we have is about specific types of spirometers. The Spirobank Smart is a home spirometer that was put in the chat. That's actually very similar to the one that we use in the trial for home spirometry. So definitely that's one of the popular ones. And again, the different pricing for that. So good to thank you for suggesting that. That's similar to the one we use, and so certainly, hopefully, there will be options for funding for clinics to use it more extensively. Thank you. Any final thoughts, Merit or Michael?
Thank you for letting me be a participant. I really have enjoyed this, and it's been a good experience.
Thank you, Michael. He's a great site. So anyone who lives near Seattle,
yes, by all means,
reach out to Dr. Weiss's team.
Great. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.